Hi, and welcome to the video for planning revisions. This video was designed for the Unit 3 exam in Algebra 2 during the school year of 2015-2016, but it can be used for other courses and for other exams. So what we'll be talking about in this video, we're going to start by just planning revisions. So that includes scheduling revisions and picking learning targets to prioritize. And then finally, we're going to talk about requirements, recommendations, and reminders. So to plan for your revision, there are three important materials that you want to have. The first is a revision planning guide. You can follow this guide without this video because there are instructions on the guide. But if you need help, just follow through the video. The second is the calendar. The calendar has the date that the revisions are due. The last day is Friday, May 13th. I made this calendar on the 27th, so all the other dates are empty. So it gives you a sense of how much time that you have. You have about 2 weeks to get the revisions completed at this point. At the bottom of the calendar, for your convenience, it shows you the questions alignment to each learning target. So for example, for learning target 3.1, that corresponds to questions 1 and 2. This is really useful when you're doing test corrections. So that way you know which questions that you need to revise. The last piece of material you need to plan for your revision is your student parent report. This report, if you need me to give you another copy of your report, I can give it to you. On this report, it shows you how well you scored, in this case just for multiple choice. Sometimes it includes constructive response, but here it's just for the multiple choice. And at the bottom, it shows you which questions you answered incorrectly. You can identify the questions you answered incorrectly because those will be the ones that are kind of darkened. Your responses are also listed as well. So for example, for question 10, this was answered incorrectly and the student chose choice A. That's the incorrect response. To find the correct answers, you can go on Google Classroom. I have the answers for the test on Google Classroom. All right, so let's begin by figuring out which learning targets we need to revise or we can consider revising. To do that, you want to open Jump Rope and click on Algebra 2 to view your scores. Go ahead and do that now. All right, once you've clicked on Algebra 2, you click on Overall Mastery and then click on Unit 3 to open up your Unit 3 scores. At any time during this video, if you need to pause so that you can complete a task that we just discussed, make sure you do so. All right, once Unit 3 is opened up, you will see the learning targets here. And then you want to go to your revision planning guide. And you're going to enter in the scores for each learning target in the third column, which says grade and jump rope. So for example, for learning target 3.1, the student has a 93.6 for that learning target. So they're going to enter that in to the third column in the learning 3.1 row. And you're going to continue to do that for all of the other learning targets. So pause the video now to fill out this third row with your jump rope grades. Okay, so once the third row is completed, you're now going to fill out your test scores using your student report. And again, in this case, these test scores are just your multiple choice scores. So this is pretty self-explanatory. You look on your report and figure out what you got for each learning target. So for example, for 3.1, the student scored a 100 and they're going to fill that into the second column. So once you get the second column complete, you can restart the video. I would pause it now to get that second column completed. Okay, so now this gives us an opportunity to figure out which learning targets we do not need to revise. And the best way to do that is to look in your jump rope grade. if you're passing that learning target in jump rope or you're satisfied with your grade, let's say you're passing with a 70 and you want to score a B, then you could consider revising that learning target as well. So it's either you're passing and or satisfied with the score, then go ahead and cross it out. So that means we're not going to revise those learning targets. All right, so now what you're left with are some learning targets that you're going to need to revise. And because there are only 2 weeks left, you may be feeling like these are too many, and you want to figure out how many should you do and which one should you do to take your revisions for. So what I did on the planning guide, if you look at table 2, we're going to start by trying to narrow down how many we should take. And I would say roughly about half of the ones that you could possibly take is what I would recommend. So, for example, this student has to revise 6 learning targets. So if you look in table 2, learning targets to revise, they have 6 here, total 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They look in this column here, and I recommend that they prioritize like 4 or 5, about half of that amount. You could do more, you could do less. You could also, at this point, since there are 6 to 7 learning targets to revise, you could consider revising the whole test. The plus side to that is that you would get the revisions done in about an hour and a half. That's how long it took most people to get the test done, maybe 2 hours. And you can get that all done in one setting. The downside to revising the whole test is that you're not chunking what you're studying. So you'll be studying all of the learning targets on that test at once. The other downside is that on the test, some learning targets have only 2 questions. So if you get one wrong, then you get a 50%. You'll get a 50% for that learning target. So I would only recommend revising the whole test if you're confident that you know the material, you have time to study, and you'll come in prepared to revise the whole test. Okay, so let's say this student decided instead of revising the whole test, they're going to just revise 4 learning targets. Well, how do you figure out which learning targets to prioritize? The first thing you want to do is you want to look at your lowest score, and that's the lowest score in jump rope and in multiple choice. So that's one place to look. So this student will definitely want to revise 3.10. The other place to look is the ones that are easiest to revise. So these are the learning targets that I think that students found the easiest: 3.1, 3.9, 3.10, and 3.11. You can read what those learning targets are to get a sense of whether or not you think those are easy. And the reason why I recommend that is because it usually will take you less time to study and prepare for those, and you'll probably do well on those. So based on those recommendations, the student maybe chose these 4 learning targets. So those are learning targets that the student's going to focus on. The next thing we need to figure out is whether or not you need to revise the constructive response or multiple choice. So the best way to do that is if you look in your jump rope score, if you have a low jump rope score but a high multiple choice score, like for example, for the student learning target 3.3, you're going to want to consider whether or not that your low score in jump rope is due to the constructive response, because remember, this grade is only for the multiple choice. So to do that, you're going to go back into jump rope, and then you're going to click on that learning target. Once you click on that learning target, it will open up the assessments that you've taken in that learning target. And it should be the last 2 assessments. It shows you the constructive response score and the multiple choice score. So as you see here, the student scored 100 on the multiple choice, which is the grade that's entered here, but 25 on the constructive response. So the student might want to consider, if they're going to revise this learning target, they're just going to have to revise the constructive response. So he or she can go ahead and check that box in the 4th column. So take a moment to do that, figure out what learning targets you need to revise for the constructive response, because that's a separate revision. All right, once that has been done, the student has identified which learning targets to prioritize and whether it's constructive response or multiple choice. The next thing is to schedule your revisions. To schedule your revisions, there are some things to consider. They are due May 13th. That's in about 2 weeks. You want to make sure that you also schedule in time to study. You also need to consider other assignments, like let's say you have a paper due or DBQ coming up. You want to consider when you have those major assignments, and try to schedule the revisions either before or after those are due. If they're due, let's say on the 11th, you want to get the revision scheduled in before, like I would say next week, this upcoming week here. Because if you wait until the 11th, you only have a couple days to get them done. If you feel like that's enough time for you, then that's fine. But if it's not, then do not wait till the last minute. Just so you know, the multiple choice, there are about 4 to 5 questions each. That should take about 20 minutes. The constructive response questions look just like the constructive response questions from the test. So you can look at the test and figure out how long it will take you to do the constructive response for each learning target. I would say some 5, maybe some 10 minutes. So take a moment now to figure out when you plan on taking the revisions. All right, once your revisions are scheduled, maybe you haven't finalized your schedule. Times can change, that's fine. I want to go through now with what you're required to do before you take the revisions. I'm only checking this time test corrections, so you need to fill out the test correction forms or do it on a separate piece of paper. Identify your mistake and correct them. And make sure you use your parent report to help you figure out what questions you answered incorrectly. Here are a few recommendations. First one, start now. Don't wait till the last minute. You've already had 2 weeks to get this started, and I've only seen one person who's gotten 3 revisions done. That's not enough. There's quite a few people who need to do revisions, so it's time to get started. Practice problems. Even though I'm not requiring them, you definitely want to do practice before you take the revision. You can pick those up from me. Get help. So this weekend, I would highly recommend, in fact, I am telling you if you need to do revision, to go through the test and the mock test and identify which questions on that test you cannot do. Try each question out again, okay? Just to make sure, for the learning targets you want to revise, just to make sure that you don't have any questions. So that next week you can come in at the beginning of the week and get help from me, or from another teacher, or from a peer. Finally, recommendation, study the tests. The questions on the multiple choice and on the constructive response are pretty much the same ones as you found on the test. Because of some of the multiple choice questions, there was only a few questions on the multiple choice on the actual test. I added a couple, but they look very similar or aligned to the questions that you saw in your test. So you want to make sure you understand what the question's asking you to do and how to do it. Couple of reminders. You can take revisions before school, at lunch, during tutorial, or after school. Another reminder is the Unit 3 playlist is on Google Classroom. You can access that playlist if you want to watch videos at home or do online practice. That's still available. And finally, as you're going through doing your test corrections, the answers for the test are on Google Classroom. So just go in Google Classroom and check your answers. If you have any questions about preparing for the revisions or when to take them, please let me know. I'm happy to help. Finally, good luck with your revisions and have a quality day.